Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Prabhupada Paramahansa, Padurikacharya Ashtotar Tadashi Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Padurikacharya Ashtotar Tadashi Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 23rd day of November, 2020 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're in the third chapter entitled Karma Yoga, text 43. I believe that is the last verse in the chapter, page 179. You got it? Okay. Evam buddhe param buddha sangstabhyatmanam jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. Evam buddhe param buddha Sangstabhyatmanam Jahi Shatrum Mahabaho Kamarupam Durasadam. Evam Buddhe Param Buddha Sangstabhyatmanam Jahi Shatrum Mahabaho Kamarupam Durasadam. Evam buddhe param buddha sangstabhyatmanam atmana jahi saptrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. Evam buddhe param buddha Sangstabhyatmanam atmana Jahi Shatrum Mahabaho Kamarupang Durasadam Evam Buddhe Param Buddha Sangstabhyatmanam atmana Jahi Shatrum Mahabaho Kamarupang Durasadam. Evam, thus, Buddhe, to intelligence, param, superior, buddha, knowing, sangstabhya, by steadying, atmanam, the mind, atmana, by deliberate intelligence, jahi, conquer, shatrum, the enemy, mahabaho, O mighty armed one, kamarupam, in the form of lust, durasadam, formidable. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Purport. This third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without considering impersonal voidness the ultimate end. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overloading and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind, by steady intelligence directed toward one's pure identity. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yogic postures can never help a man toward spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the third chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of karma yoga, or the discharge of one's prescribed duty in Krishna consciousness. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, the idea here, if we review, Krishna begins his answer to Arjuna's question, which was, what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? That was text number 36. And the answer is lust, kama esha, krodesha, which is born of contact with material motive passion and later transformed into wrath, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. And how does this lust, why is it our enemy? Because it covers our knowledge, our actual knowledge of who we are and what God is and what our relationship is. And there's different degrees of the covering. The example is given first of the covering of smoke, covering fire. So the fire is our original intelligence, original knowledge, but there's some smoke that's covering it. So this is the human intelligence. We are the one species that has a chance to understand these things and actually act on it and break out of this bond of illusion that we've been in since time immemorial. Then there's the mirror covered by dust, so that's more obscuring. With the smoke, you can see some of the light of the fire, but if there's a thick layer of dust on that mirror, you can't see any reflection. So that's like the animals. And then even more covered is the fetus in the womb. He doesn't see anything. He's completely covered. That's like some plants or something, you know. So, how does it work? Avatam Gyanametina. Nitya, this eternal enemy covers the knowledge of the knower, Jnanina. We're the knower. We're originally in full knowledge, but that's been covered over. And this lust it never gives up. It's like fire. As long as fire has fuel, it's going to keep growing and burning and destroying. So lust is like that. As long as we keep trying to satisfy those senses, then lust it's just like, at first there may be some decrease because you're satiated, but then it burns up that much more. The desire is more. So that's not the way to deal with lust. So then he analyzes how it works. The senses, the mind, and intelligence are sitting places of the lust, and through them, lust covers our intelligence. It bewilders us. Jnanam avrita dehinam. Knowledge is covered of the living entity. And so then the logical conclusion is, tasmat, therefore, in the beginning one has to control the senses. Niyamya bharatasha means to control. In this way conquer this enemy known as lust, which destroys knowledge and realized knowledge. In other places it's described how the very desire or interest in spiritual life is destroyed when you become too much involved in sense gratification. It completely quenches the fire or covers it and makes it impossible to advance. So then there's this analysis, how you have a hierarchy. You have the sense objects. The senses are like superior to them. But superior to the senses is the mind. The mind directs the senses where to go, what to do, what to perceive. But superior to the mind is the intelligence. The intelligence can control the mind if it's strong. So wait. It looks like it's enjoyable, but let's think a little bit down the road. You want to smoke this, you want to do this, you want to drink this, but it has a bad reaction. So the intelligence, if it's strong enough, it can control the mind. But the intelligence can also become saturated with karma, and then it's just different plans how you can, the intelligence is planning things out. So now the conclusion is of the chapter and this whole argument. Therefore, the whole key, as we've said before, it came up this morning, is to strengthen the intelligence through hearing, through doing what we're doing now. Thus, understanding through your intelligence that you yourself, the soul, are transcendental to all these things. Conquer this enemy known as lust, kama rupam durasadam. Now, how are you going to do that? Through yoga, through a process of yoga. And that begins the next chapter. Imam vivasvade yogam. I spoke this yoga process to Vivasvan, the sun god who spoke it to his son, Manu, Vivasvata Manu, and came down to Ikshvaku. So that's understood. That yoga process is bhakti yoga. Now this karma yoga that we've been reading about, naturally it has to do with activities. And the whole idea is that we have to live in this world, and we know that we're being influenced by previous activities, we're getting with karmic reactions. So we want to try to nullify those. How do you nullify those karmic reactions? Well, you can't do it by more fruit of activity, and that's why there's this idea of sacrifice. If you're actually sacrificing for the Supreme with your activity, then you're not incurring any new karma, and you're burning off the old karma, because devotional service does that. Karmani niyadahati kintuta bhakti bhajan. It says in the Govinda prayers in Brahma Samhita. By the process of devotional service, burns to ashes, nirdahati kintuta bhakti bhajan. So this is what real karma yoga is, and that's why it's the first of the different stages. Your karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, bhakti yoga. Krishna's going to go through all of these. And really each of them has a part to play in bhakti yoga. Certainly jnana yoga. I mean, this is what we're studying Bhagavad Gita, hearing the Shastra. This is jnana. We're trying to attain this knowledge, strengthen the intelligence, so we can control lower self and keep our focus. Vyavasayatmaka buddhi. That buddhi has to be one-pointed. Otherwise, if it's Bhogaishwarya Prasaktanam, these two verses are very important in the second chapter. If you're too much involved with enjoyment and opulence, and your mind's bewildered by those things, then you're going to be many-branched. Going here, do that, and do this plan, that plan. Oh, it didn't work. Do this. Your whole life can be spent like that. So that Vivasayatmaka Buddhi, that's essential for advancement in devotional service. You strengthen the intelligence, and then having so many wonderful instructions, you keep your mind on that, and gradually that becomes second nature. And the fires of material desires start to go out, because you're not feeding them. If you're not feeding that fire of lust, but rather you're directing your desires, because we have to have the desires, but the desires toward Krishna, towards serving Krishna, serving his devotees, performing devotional service, then you can actually conquer this enemy with Krishna's help. That's the idea. It's a process of purification and sublimation. And this is why Krishna consciousness is filled with so many things for the senses. Here we are sitting amongst all these paintings here. Well, these are Prabhupada windows to the spiritual world. You know? You can meditate on these paintings, chant japa. You remember Braj Mohan? He used to chant half his japa, most of his japa in front of that painting. In fact, he merged into the painting. He loved kirtan. So there's so what to speak of the deities, you know. And now, you know, the internet can be a real jala, a real web. It's called a web, right? It can be a real entanglement. But there's also so many wonderful things on there for Krishna consciousness. You know, you can hear wonderful lectures, you can see videos, you can take parakram. You know, I haven't had the time to do that, but they're doing parakram, Vrindavan parakram, and Navadvip Mandal parakram, virtually, you know. One devotee who knows, and he goes around and takes. So, each of the senses, that's why it says, Indriyanyo niyamya, you have to control them. That doesn't mean you have to stop them. It means you have to figure out the Krishna conscious way you can engage in a sense, or don't engage it. If there's nothing to do with a specific sense, then you can't engage it in Krishna consciousness. And then get more and more purified, and then it becomes spontaneous. It becomes an absolute pleasure. The things that were discipline, that that were part of your Vaidhi Bhakti, we have to establish duty, and, even if we don't want to do it, we do it. But at a certain point, it becomes pleasurable to do. Tulsi Puja, Mangalarti, chanting the holy name. All of this is actually very pleasurable for the soul. The reason why we're not experiencing it all the time as in ecstasy is because we're so conditioned and habituated to think materially. So it's a training process, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. So that's this chapter, and there's some very important verses here. One of the most important is this Yagyartat Kaumanon Yatra Lokoyam Karma Bandhana. Everything you do has to be in sacrifice of Vishnu, otherwise whatever you're doing is binding you to this world. Prakate Kriyamanani, text 27. This is some of the famous hits of chapter 3. Prakate Kriyamanani, Prabhupada would quote this verse all the time. Prakate Kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimunhada kartahamiti manyate. That everything is actually being done by nature under the guidance of Krishna. But we, bewildered by false ego, ahankara vimudhatma, thinking I'm doing everything. You see? When you really think about it, where's the energy coming for me to do anything? Where's the intelligence coming for me to do anything? Where's the environment that I use, the materials that I build this house with or build this computer with? It's all coming from Krishna. So he's doing everything. He's providing the material energy, he's providing my subtle intelligence to do it. So Krishna's doing it through the material energy. Maya jakshena prakati suyate sataratam. That's another verse in the 9th chapter. This material energy is creating and moving this world under my supervision. So when you see things like that, then naturally our natural state is to be part of the whole cooperative element to serve Krishna with our activities, because it all belongs to him. That's what the Ishopanishad is all about. Isha Vashamidam Sarvam. So our false ego, remember I was talking about that this morning, I think, Icha Dvesha Samutena, that when we get bewildered by the desire, by lust, but to enjoy, and therefore we hate serving Krishna, Dvesha, then that gives rise to this delusion of duality in this material world. Oh, this is pleasurable, this is painful, I don't want that, I'm going to go for this. Pleasure and pain, heat and cold, all good and bad. So that brings us into this material world and keeps us in the material world. But when we judge things in terms of their utility for Krishna's service, and we try to engage as much as possible in his service, that's called yukta vairagya. You know this one, Alex? Anasaktasya vishayan yutaham upayunjana. It's in that list. You get it. It's the definition of detachment in yoga, yukta vairagya, and it's part of the karma yoga, really. It's bhakti of activity. So anasaktasya vishayan, without attachment to the objects of the senses. Now, in our conditioned state, something may be very attractive to us, but we don't try to engage it for ourselves. This is for Krishna. A classic thing is food. You can go down to the supermarket, or you can go, and there's so many, look at these mangoes. This is nice, let me get one. And before you even get to the parking lot, you bite it. That's what the material life is. So, what a beautiful mango, you can offer it to Krishna. That's transcendental. It looks like the same activity, but it's a world of distance because your intent is different. Your intention is the thing, your motive. So that's, otherwise we fall into this illusion of thinking that we're the doers, we're the owners, we're the enjoyers, rather than the servants. So that verse is Prakriti Kriyamanani. Another famous one here is Yadyadacharati Shreshtas Tattadevetaro Jana Sayat Pramanam Kurate Lokas Tadanavatate. That the leading personality sets the standard, the pramana, the evidence for what to do and what not to do. Tattadevetaro Janaha, the people in general, Sayat Pramanam Kurate. They see that, he's acting that way, I can act that way. And we could see it, playing out in the daily news. So that's another important one. And finally, here's this verse 30 that Prabhupada says at the beginning. This verse clearly indicates the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. When I read that many years ago, I immediately memorized the verse. This is the verse. Mai sarvani karmani sanyasyajat pachetasa nirashir nimamo bhutva yudya sarvakatajura. Therefore, O Arjun, surrendering all your works unto me with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. So that last word is duty. So we can plug in our own duty. Without free from lethargy, wash the pots. Without free from lethargy, go distribute books. So this is a very nice verse to know. So there's a lot of important instructions in this chapter. All right, we have time to begin the next chapter, which is entitled Transcendental Knowledge, Jnana Yoga. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Hamabhyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manodikshvakave Bravit. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god, Vivasvan. And Vivasvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind. And Manu, in turn, instructed it to Ikshvaku. Purport. Herein we find the history of the Bhagavad Gita traced from a remote time when it was delivered to the royal order of all planets, beginning from the sun planet. The kings of all planets are especially meant for the protection of the inhabitants, and therefore the royal order should understand the science of the Bhagavad Gita in order to be able to rule the citizens and protect them from material bondage to lust. So that ties us into the last chapter. Human life is meant for cultivation of spiritual knowledge in eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the executive heads of all states and all planets are obliged to impart this lesson to the citizens by education, culture, and devotion. In other words, the executive heads of all states are intended to spread the science of Krishna consciousness so that the people may take advantage of this great science and pursue a successful path, utilizing the opportunity of the human form of life. In this millennium, the sun god is known as Vivasvan, the king of the sun, which is the origin of all planets within the solar system. In the Brahma Samhita 552 it is stated, let's see if we can do this one. I'll do it line by line. Yat chakshuresa savita sakalagrahanam Raja samasta sudamurti rashesha teja Yasyagya brahmati sambrita kala chakro Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Let me worship, Lord Brahma said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is the original person and under whose order the sun, which is the king of all planets, is assuming immense power and heat. The sun represents the eye of the Lord and traverses its orbit in obedience to his order. The sun is the king of the planets, and the sun god, at present of the name Vivasvan, rules the sun planet, which is controlling all other planets by supplying heat and light. He is rotating under the order of Krishna, and Lord Krishna originally made Vivasvan his first disciple to understand the science of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is not therefore a speculative treatise for the insignificant mundane scholar, but is a standard book of knowledge coming down from time immemorial. In the Mahabharata, Shanti Parva 3:48, 51-52, we can trace out the history of the Gita as follows. Treta Yugadao Chatato Vivasvam Anavedadao Manuschaloka Brityatam Suta Yekshvaka Vedadao Yekshvakona Chakatito Vyapiloka Navastitaha. In the beginning of the millennium known as Treta Yuga, this science of the relationship with the Supreme was delivered by Vivasvan to Manu. Manu began being the father of mankind, gave it to his son Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of the earth planet and forefather of the Raghu dynasty in which Lord Ramchandra appeared. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita existed in human society from the time of Maharaj Ikshvaku. At the present moment, we have just passed through 5,000 years of the Kali Yuga, which lasts 432,000 years. Before this, there was Dwapara Yuga, 800,000 years. And before that, there was Treta Yuga, 1,200,000 years. Thus, some 2,005,000 years ago, Manu spoke the Bhagavad Gita to his disciple and son Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of this planet Earth. The age of the current Manu is calculated to last some 305,300,000 years, of which 120,400,000 have passed. Accepting that before the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken by the Lord to his disciple, the sun god Vivasvan. A rough estimate is that the Gita was spoken at least 120,400,000 years ago. And in human society, it has been extant for 2 million years. It was respoken by the Lord again to Arjuna about 5,000 years ago. That is the rough estimate of the history of the Gita, according to the Gita itself, and according to the version of the speaker, Lord Sri Krishna. It was spoken to the sun god Vivasvan because he is also a Kshatriya and is the father of all Kshatriyas who are descendants of the sun god, or the Surya Vangsha Kshatriyas. Because the Bhagavad Gita is as good as the Vedas, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this knowledge is apaurushaya, superhuman. Since the Vedic instructions are accepted as they are, without human interpretation, the Gita must therefore be accepted without mundane interpretation. The mundane wranglers may speculate on the Gita in their own ways, but that is not the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita has to be accepted as it is, from the disciplic succession, and it is described herein that the Lord spoke to the sun god spoke to his son Manu, and Manu spoke to his son Ikshvaku. So, this is describing the history of the Bhagavad Gita and how it came down into human society. It's important to understand the antiquity of this science, that this is not something new, that's not something concocted recently. This is Krishna speaking each time. He spoke to the sun god, and he's also speaking to Arjuna, and he's also speaking to us. This is just as relevant today as it was 5,200 million years ago, as it will always be. When is it going to be irrelevant? What is the living entity? The process of transmigration? Who is the source of everything? Those questions are eternal in any language, any era, any time. So the Bhagavad Gita is always relishable, but as Prabhupada emphasizes here, especially at the end of this purport, it has to be received as it is. Because the Bhagavad Gita is so famous that it's often taken and misinterpreted by unscrupulous commentators for their own purposes. So this should give us confidence that we're witnessing the very ancient and perfect science here. So, text 2. Evam parampara praptam Imam Raja Shayo Viduhu Sakaline Hamata Yogo Nashtak Parantapa. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. So this word Rajarshiya is important. A combination of a king and a rishi. In other words, a learned king who's ready to follow the instructions of the devotee Brahmins and Vaishnavas, and who himself is often very learned. We have examples we just read about Prithu. Dhruva became a great king like that. Yudhishthira. There are many examples in the Pariksit in the Bhagavatam. Purport. It is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Certainly the Bhagavad Gita was never meant for the demonic persons who would dissipate its value for no one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretations according to personal whims. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to re-establish a disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago it was detected by the Lord himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore he declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment also, there is so many editions of the Gita, especially in English, but almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. There are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Krishna, Sri Krishna. This spirit is demonic, because demons do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of the Gita in English, as it is received by the Parampara disciplic succession system, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. The Bhagavad Gita, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity, but if it is accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply a waste of time. So I'm going to kind of introduce something here that you probably never heard before. The Bhagavad Gita has a purpose. The purpose is to, part of the important purpose is to enlighten the kings who are ruling. Arjuna was going to be a leader when they won the battle. Yudhishthira would be the king, but he would also be an administrator. So it's important that he have this science. But in general, as we read here and we read in the Bhagavatam, that the kings are very important because, as I quoted from the last chapter, not only in their administrative activities, but in their very example of how they live, their teaching, they're giving, they're setting the tone for society. So it's very key that they be devotees, and this Bhagavad Gita is really meant for them, as he said right here in this verse. But it has a purpose. But Prabhupada would sometimes use the word purpose to mean purport, meaning. And I puzzled about this. I checked and I looked these things up in the Oxford English Dictionary, which I have on my computer. And sure enough, one of the meanings of purpose is meaning. In other words, purport. So we have to watch out for that. And sometimes this word purpose appears several times in this purport. And I think one of these times. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore he declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. I think there it means the purport that has been misinterpreted, and therefore the actual import or the meaning, what Krishna's actually meaning, has been distorted. And anyway, so that's interesting. But it's both things. If the purport is distorted, the purpose cannot be served. That's for sure. Okay, so going on. So why should Krishna speak it to Arjuna? This next verse describes why he picked him out. Sehevayam mayatedya yoga prokta puratanaha bhaktosi me sakhacheti rahasyam yetur uttamam. That very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend, and can therefore understand the transcendental mystery of this science. Purport. There were two classes of men, namely the devotee and the demon. The Lord has selected Arjuna as the recipient of this great science, owing to his being a devotee of the Lord. But for the demon, it is not possible to understand this great mysterious science. There are a number of editions of this great book of knowledge. Some of them have commentaries by the devotees, and some of them have commentaries by the demons. Commentation by the devotees is real, whereas that of the demons is useless. Arjuna accepts Sri Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and any commentary on the Gita following in the footsteps of Arjuna is real devotional service to the cause of this great science. The demonic, however, do not accept Lord Krishna as he is. Instead, they concoct something about Krishna and mislead general readers from the path of Krishna's instructions. Here is a warning about such misleading paths. One should try to follow the disciplic succession from Arjuna and thus be benefited by this great science of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So this phrase here, Bhaktosi me sakacheti, you are my devotee and my friend, rahasam yetiruttamam, and therefore I'm speaking to you this great secret, because it's a mystery. You can't, we should always remember that Krishna is in our heart. He's giving us the power to hear, the power to understand. And if we are nonsense, when we're trying to misuse the Bhagavad Gita, then it'll immediately cover the actual meaning of it. And, I had an experience like that. Some of you may have read another Bhagavad Gita before coming to Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And it wasn't at all clear that the whole purpose of the Bhagavad Gita is to surrender to Krishna, become his devotee, think of him all the time. Even though he says that in various places, there's so many other things going on that it's easy to distort. I remember once back in the 60s, there was some yoga group, a famous yoga group at the time, and they had a Bhagavad Gita, but it was only up to the end of the 6th chapter. Hey, what's going on? So that's the whole point. You bring the meditative chapter. That's it. You just cut off the last 12 chapters. So, it's not easy to see, especially while reading these early chapters, that the whole thing culminates in Manmanabhava Madbhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskaru. Text 65 of the 18th chapter, which repeats text 34, last verse of the 9th chapter. This is the most secret of all secrets. Now I'm going to tell you again, Arjuna, about the most secret. And that is, think of me, become my devotee, worship me, bow down low, and you'll come to me. And he reiterates it in the next verse, which is the famous Sarva Dharma Parityaja Mamekam Sharanamaja. Give up all other dharmas. In other words, all of these I'm teaching you now, forget about that. As long as you follow Manmanabhava Madbhakta, then everything is compacted in those two verses. So where do you find that except in the bhakti commentaries? You won't find that, because Krishna he reserves the right of not being understood or visible to the non-devotees. He says that. Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavrata mudhoyam nabijanati lokamam. The whole world doesn't know me because they're bewildered by these three modes. And even though I'm standing right in front of them, they don't understand that I'm the Supreme Master. So this is very important to understand what qualifies us to enter into the mystery of the understanding of this Gita. And that is to become a bhakta, try to humble devotee, a proper receptacle. We have that. Remember that word that we keep coming up, shushusho shradhanasya vasudeva kataruji. It's obviously based on the word hearing, shravanam shushusho, but it has this meaning of submissive. Probably we would sometimes translate it submissive oral reception, or ardent hearing. Like drinking it in. Not the mind isn't providing all the static doubts and like that. No, it's just drinking it in as pure nectar, and being willing to follow the instructions. So shushusho means hearing, which is itself service, and in the proper mood, and then acting on that knowledge that you received. That's the shushusho. And if you hear the Bhagavatam in that way, it says you very quickly have the Lord manifest in your heart. So what's the need of any other scripture? Because we have the Bhagavad Gita and all the books we have. But that's the idea. So therefore he's speaking it to Arjuna. Now Arjuna, he asks a question that leads to Krishna to explain how and why and when he appears. The famous verse that you learned. When did you first learn it? When you were 5, right? Yada yada hi dharmasya. You learned it as a child, right? Isn't that a wonderful culture? We're coming up on that verse in a few verses. So now Arjuna asks his question, which leads to that verse. Arjuna vacha aparam bhavato janma padam janma vivasvataha katametad vijaniyam tvamadao proktavaniti. Arjuna said, the sun god Vivasvan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? Purport. Arjuna is an accepted devotee of the Lord's, so how could he not believe Krishna's words? The fact is that Arjuna is not inquiring for himself, but for those who do not believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or for the demons who do not like the idea that Krishna should be accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For them only, Arjuna inquires on this point, as if he were himself not aware of the personality of Godhead, or Krishna. As it will be evident from the 10th chapter, Arjuna knew perfectly well that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the fountainhead of everything, and the last word in transcendence. Of course, Krishna also appeared as the son of Devaki on this earth. How Krishna remained the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, the eternal original person, is very difficult for an ordinary man to understand. Therefore, to clarify this point, Arjuna put this question before Krishna so that he himself, Krishna, could speak authoritatively. That Krishna is the supreme authority is accepted by the whole world, not only at present, but from time immemorial, and the demons alone reject him. Anyway, since Krishna is the authority accepted by all, Arjuna put this question before him in order that Krishna would describe himself without being depicted by the demons, who always try to distort him in a way understandable to the demons and their followers. It is necessary that everyone, for his own interest, know the science of Krishna. Therefore, when Krishna himself speaks about himself, it is auspicious for all the worlds. To the demons, such explanations by Krishna himself may appear to be strange, because the demons always study Krishna from their own standpoint. But those who are devotees heartily welcome the statements of Krishna when they are spoken by Krishna himself. The devotees will always worship such authoritative statements of Krishna because they are always eager to know more and more about him. The atheists who consider Krishna an ordinary man may in this way come to know that Krishna is superhuman, that he is Satchit Ananda Vigraha, the eternal form of bliss and knowledge, that he is transcendental, and that he is above the domination of the modes of material nature and above the influence of time and space. A devotee of Krishna, like Arjuna, is undoubtedly above any misunderstanding of the transcendental position of Krishna. Arjuna's putting this question before the Lord is simply an attempt by the devotee to defy the atheistic attitude of persons who consider Krishna to be an ordinary human being subject to the modes of material nature. Okay. All right, so let's go on to the next one. It's another important verse in 3 verses here. Let's see, 3, that's 2, 3, 4. 4 verses, the next 4 verses, Krishna will explain how and why and when he appears. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Bahuni me vatitani Janmani Tabacharjana Tanyaham Veda Sarvani Natvam Vetta Parantapa. The personality of God had said, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. Purport. In the Brahma Samhita 533, we have information of many, many incarnations of the Lord. It is stated there, I'll say you say, Advaitamatchutamanadimanantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayavavanancha Vedeshu Durlabhamadurlabhamatma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is the original person, absolute, infallible, without beginning. Although expanded into unlimited forms, he is still the same original, the oldest, and the person always appearing as a fresh youth. Such eternal, blissful, all-knowing forms of the Lord are usually not understood by even the best Vedic scholars, but they are always manifest to pure, unalloyed devotees. It is also stated in the Brahma Samhita 539. Rama dimurti shikalani yamena tishtan Nana avatara makarod bhuvaneshu kintu Krishna swayam samabhavat padamakpamanyo Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is always situated in various incarnations such as Rama, Nrsimha, and many sub-incarnations as well, but who is the original personality of Godhead known as Krishna, and who incarnates personally also. In the Vedas also it is said that the Lord, although one without a second, manifests himself in innumerable forms. He is like the Vaidurya stone, which changes color yet still remains one. All those multiforms are understood by the pure unalloyed devotees, but not by a simple study of the Vedas. Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhakto. Devotees like Arjuna are constant companions of the Lord, and whenever the Lord incarnates, the associate devotees also incarnate in order to serve the Lord in different capacities. Arjuna is one of these devotees, and in this verse it is understood that some millions of years ago, when Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god Vivasvan, Arjuna, in a different capacity, was also present. But the difference between the Lord and Arjuna is that the Lord remembered the incident, whereas Arjuna could not remember. That is the difference between the part and parcel living entity and the Supreme Lord. Although Arjuna is addressed herein as the mighty hero who could subdue the enemies, he is unable to recall what had happened in his various past births. Therefore, a living entity, however great he may be in the material estimation, can never equal the Supreme Lord. Anyone who is a constant companion of the Lord is certainly a liberated person, but he cannot be equal to the Lord. The Lord is described in the Brahma Samhita as infallible, Achyuta, which means that he never forgets himself, even though he is in material contact. Therefore, the Lord and the living entity can never be equal in all respects, even if the living entity is as liberated as Arjuna. Although Arjuna is a devotee of the Lord, he sometimes forgets the nature of the Lord. But by the divine grace, a devotee can at once understand the infallible condition of the Lord, whereas a non-devotee or a demon cannot understand this transcendental nature. Consequently, these descriptions in the Gita cannot be understood by demonic brains. Krishna remembered acts which were performed by him millions of years before, but Arjuna could not, despite the fact that both Krishna and Arjuna are eternal in nature. We may also note herein that a living entity forgets everything due to his change of body, but the Lord remembers because he does not change his Satchidananda body. He is Advaita, which means there is no distinction between his body and himself. Everything in relation to him is spirit, whereas the conditioned soul is different from his material body. And because the Lord's body and self are identical, his position is always different from that of the ordinary living entity, even when he descends to the material platform. The demons cannot adjust themselves to this transcendental nature of the Lord, which the Lord himself explains in the following verse. So this is a lot of information here. And again we find this idea that the devotee can understand the Lord. Adurlabham atma bhakto. If you look at the top of page 87, you see that verse from the Brahma Samhita. And Adurlabha means is easy to understand by those who are wholeheartedly devoted to him, the devotees. But the great Vedic scholars, Durlabham, is very difficult to understand. Krishna puts the curtain of Maya there. And this is typical, the great learned sages. They think they know so much, but it's all material knowledge. The spiritual knowledge is only available by the gift of Krishna, either personally or through his representative. And so only through bhakti can he be understood at all. So this is very important information. And then there's this idea of there's so many expanses. Rama adi murtisikala nimitishtan. non-avatar, various kinds of avatars, expansions, but of all of them, Krishna is the supreme. He is the absolute Bhagavan. I don't know if I mentioned this before. There's a verse in the Bhagavatam, I think it's 1:328. Ete changsa kalapungsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indari Vakalam Midyanti Yuge Yuge. That there's just before this verse there's a whole list which includes the Dash avatars and some others. And even in the list, Krishna's there. He's also part of the list with Balaram. So therefore it says, among all of these, they're all either Angsha, parts of Krishna, empowered, because among the list he also has like the 4 Kumaras, I think are there, Narada Muni. They're not all Vishnu Tattva. But Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. That's a very important line to understand. It means, but Krishna is Bhagavan himself. In other words, he's qualitatively different. How is he different? Say it's from Ramchandra or the other Vishnu Tattvas. We have Nrsingadev, we have Vamanadev, we have Kurma Rupa, the turtle, right? We have Matsya. These are all Vishnu Tattva. And but they're all Krishna in one sense, right? They're non-different from Krishna, but they lack one or more of the 6 opulences in full. Like Ram was very beautiful, very attractive, but he didn't have the all attractiveness of Krishna. You know what I'm saying? And then in some avatars would say, well, they don't have so much, like the boar incarnation doesn't have that. Of boars, he's, very special, obviously, but he doesn't have that, all attractive nature of Krishna. But he has a power, and the strength was there, lifted up the earth. So Krishna's too. Therefore, Krishna is Bhagavan. Now, there's this verse that is important to know: description of Bhagavan or definition of Bhagavan by Parashara Muni. I don't know if any of you know who Parashara Muni was. He was some very famous person's very, very famous father, Vyasadev's father, Parashara Muni. So he has this verse as a measure of who Bhagavan actually is. Aishwaryasya samagrasya viryasya yashashakshya jnana vairagayaschaiva shannam bhaga itingana. Bhaga means opulence. These 6 opulences in full, then if you find someone, that's Bhagavan. So the first one is Aishwarya, which means wealth. But it also means controlling power. They go together. One who has so much money, the billionaires, they can control everything. They can buy, politicians here and everything. So that's Aishwaryasya. Samagrasya. Samagrasya means in full, and that applies to all of the lists. Viryasya, strength. We just had Govardhan Puja, But in addition to that, Krishna manifests all the universes. There's no question of his strength. Yasha, fame. Fame. Even if someone may not know the name Krishna, they have heard of God, So, and he's all famous, the most famous throughout the ages. And Shriya. Shriya here means beauty, So Krishna's beauty is unsurpassed, unequaled and unsurpassed. The gopis would say, this verse just before the 10th canto, the end of the 9th canto, Yasyananam Makatakundada Charukarna Brajat Kapoda Subhagang Savalasa Hasam Nityotsavam Tantatapur Dishabi Babanto Nayo Narashtamudita Kupitastra Mescha. So it's describing his face, the face of Krishna in Vrindavan. Yasyananam Makatakundala, those shark-shaped earrings on his cheeks. Charuhasa, very attractive smile. Yasyan Makatakunda Charukarna, on the beautiful ears, charming ears, these earrings. Brajat Kapola, his shining cheeks, and they're made more shining by those dancing earrings, shark-shaped earrings. Brajat Kapola Subhagang Savilasa Hasam, a very playful, attractive smile. Savilasa Hasam Nityotsavam. You know what Nitya Utsavam means. Let's analyze the word, okay? Nitya Utsavam. What is a Utsav? And what is Nitya? An eternal festival for the mind. Krishna's face. Not tatra pur. They're not satisfied. The residents of Vrindavan, they're never satiated by seeing Krishna's face. 7 days and nights, they're looking at Krishna's face under the Govardhan hill. They never became, said, okay, that's enough. What else can you show me? No, that was enough. Just watching that beautiful face with the charming smile and everything. Not tatra pur. They're not satisfied. Drishabi babanto, drinking in the beauty of the face. That's it. Pibanti means to drink. Nayo nara, not just the women, but the men also. Nayo narasta mudita kupitasta. And they curse Brahma as a fool for creating eyelashes where you have to blink and miss out for 1 split second. So that's beauty. Jnana, vairagyas, and unlimited knowledge, and detachment. In spite of having all these things and all the servants in the world, he detached. He proved it by leaving the rasa dance in the middle, like that. So these 6 are define the. Oh my God! Okay, we have to adjourn. Yeah. Yeah, not Arizona, New Mexico. Yeah, I think in New Mexico. Anyway, we'll do that tomorrow. But thank you for the donation. We'll acknowledge it more tomorrow. Hare Krishna.